And
We
we're
are
live.
live. This
Yeah.
hangout is on here live. Good evening, everybody. Testing, testing. I see Dr.
Yeah.
Venkman in channel.
Rock on. Hello, doctor.
Yeah, and I hear you too. I think this is pretty awesome.
So this is the this is it. This is the beginning of the actual Extreme Movie Show channel. We've been doing on my live stream. Of course, YouTube took away my power to do that, and we brought it over to your channel. And we said, well, why don't we just create a third where that frees you up to talk about whatever you want? And I've still got the comic books over there, because generally people who go to a comic book channel, if you're talking about movies, they want to hear about superhero films or genre films like this, and this will free us up to talk about Roma, because everybody wants to talk about a boring ass Spanish film on Netflix that I don't know anybody who's watched that. But yeah.
No, I'm pretty excited myself too, because I know this is something we've talked about for a very long time. We've talked about it with some of the live streams, with what you were doing, with when Dalton was joining us, when I was taking over, when your channel was unsubscribed, and it was one of those things where I said, you know what, this is a real good opportunity for both of us to spend time doing something what we want. So, like to, of course, say thank you to Dr. Venkman for being the first person. And of course, this is the first time I am going to sit there and say good evening. You are listening live from the underground bunker in an undisclosed location from the Pine Hills Palace, the Extreme Movie Show. I am your host, Rob Zilla, and as always, the co-host is Englentine.
Hey, true believers. I like that. I'm the co-host now. Okay.
Took a break from Diamonds Forever for this. You know what? That's probably good that you did, because we're going to talk a little bit tonight about what we're going to be doing with the channel, some of the things for it. We've actually gotten a lot of feedback. I know I have, and Englentine, I know I want to hear about some of the feedback you've gotten from your base. Obviously, we're starting from scratch, and we're trying to get over as many people as possible as soon as possible, but we definitely want to have a certain level of quality with our commentary that we have come to know. So let's just start off, talk a little news before we get into what's new, and maybe some notes and all that too. What have you got going on?
Before we do that, I do want to talk. Yeah, Venkman actually sent a couple of messages. He is watching the James Bond movies as well. So that's one thing I'm very glad we're postponing one more week. But we will be doing it next week. So you guys can get caught up on your James Bond as well. And then, because we're going all in. We're going all in on these things.
And we're going in order.
Yeah, we're going to be dissecting, and we're going to be talking about starting with Sean Connery. Although I was thinking about maybe we should do a separate kind of show for like Casino Royale with Woody Allen, Never Say Never Again.
Yes, it's going to be one for Connery, one for Moore,
and maybe the Lazenby,
and then one for all the leftovers. That's what I call it, to be honest.
Maybe
Lazenby. Any of that stuff.
It's in continuity, but it's his only film. So where do you put that? So
at the end, because everyone always remembers Connery first, Moore second, and Craig probably fourth, and Brosnan third. So we got a good 4 or 5 weeks worth of going for that too. Venkman, I've seen all of these gazillions of times. I can watch one for 5 minutes and almost remember everything that's going on just out of osmosis.
I have a different problem than Rob Zilla, because I watch so many movies that sometimes it's, I lose little details that if we're going to be discussing things, I really want to keep a hold of. So while I remember the overall feel, or I'll remember maybe an iconic scene, or even just a few little things that appealed to me directly, I don't exactly remember everything. Like I remember from Russia with Love, I remember a battle on a train between Quint from Jaws and James Bond. But beyond that, I don't remember shit. So I do want to check these out and take notes in the whole 9 yards.
Yeah, and I think it's important too, because as we get older and our time gets even more precious, what to spend it on is very important. And it'll be interesting to sit there as we talk about some of these things. I always consider myself a big Bond fan, but by and large, overall, I don't necessarily think it's a great franchise. In a way I do, but we'll get into that a little bit and compare it probably to some others, but it's just one of those ones where you just happen to know it so well that you can talk about it.
That is a topic that I actually want to go through as we're talking about things. I really do want to analyze franchises. Is Star Wars still a great franchise? Is Aliens? I would not say that Aliens is a great franchise anymore, just based on what I think of right now. However, when we do talk about it, I want to be able to rewatch these movies so we can really given on, but I would love to go like we did with the Halloween series and say, okay, this, and this, is it still really a great franchise, or are we just remembering that first movie or the second movie so well that we have kind of convinced ourselves that it was a great franchise? And that could be something we talk about at the end of the Bonds.
Well, I think that we've been pretty excited talking about this stuff for a good 6 months, 8 months or so that we've been starting to get together and working on this. So I know it's a work in progress as always, but one thing I've always appreciated the fact is that was something Venkman just said, which I think is 100% true, and we talk about it every time before we get on or even afterwards. Where Venkman's saying, hey, I don't know if you see the comment there. I used to watch these with my dad, so it's a way to keep me alive. I have so many fond memories of the movies my dad would take me to see, and then of course people may not understand, even though we've talked about it a couple times, just how many movies you've seen, the fact that you've been a manager forever in movie theaters, how we used to see them all. And those are some of my fondest memories too, as we became, young adults and started drifting apart and doing our own things too, is that if we ever have a few minutes to catch up after the family talk and all the serious stuff, that's what we want to do. Hey, what movie did you see? What'd you like about it? How was fun? I go back to feeling like I'm, 12 years old again, and it just never goes away. So yeah. I'm excited that Bond's going to be the big one that we start off with too. Not that it was maybe your favorite. Okay, it was kind of probably mine, but just to get involved in that level of detail, we can spend all day on it. So
okay, and that's going to start. That's going to start next week. That we're going to start with the Bond thing. So, but for today, let's just go through some news and some reviews and see where it lands us. And obviously, Venkman, if you and the other person watching wants to chime in, by all means, do so.
Well, one note, but before we jump into the news there, what you mentioned before, because you have so many subscribers on your other channel coming over and being a part of it too, that I've obviously appreciate the fact that that's starting to grow our initial base here, is that with people sharing all that too, just remind everybody that it is a great deal of feedback that we get from them on sometimes how we want to course correct and address stuff. It's not just always 100% what we want to talk about. So Venkman and other people that really like Bond gave us, I think, some reasons to say, you know what, we talked about it before a little bit. Let's talk about it some more. And it's actually a video that kept getting legs on the last one that we did on on my channel. So I think that's kind of a good thing too. So I like the fact that we have such a diverse audience, but people that have a reason why they watch movies. It's not just another movie. It has some sort of connection for it too. On Her Majesty's Secret Service, Venkman, I will tell you, I think it's one of the better ones out of the entire franchise. I know you say no regrets, but
yeah. Well, I told him the same thing. From what I remember, of course, it was really good, but Lazenby is really wooden. He's not the strong point.
Completely underrated. Definitely very good, in my opinion. But we'll get to that later. So news.
Looking forward to see if my opinion changes. Okay, so one thing I think of note, and I'm sure we can talk about with fond memory, is this is the 25th anniversary of the death of John Candy.
It's funny how we talked about John Hughes movies, and you can't almost think of John Hughes movies without talking John Candy.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, I brought up Uncle Buck and Planes, Trains, and Automobiles as being two movies that I absolutely watched during the holiday season. I mean, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. Name another good Thanksgiving film.
Thanksgiving.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. Yeah. There you go. Yeah. Attacking people. You really, you bitch slapped me on that one. But seriously, it is an amazing movie. And so, there's John Candy is one of those people I always figured, and I know you have more of a limit than I do. But you never saw a bad John Candy, but you may have seen a bad John Candy movie. Yep. And that's, he's always one of those charming style actions or actors. Who's Harry Crumb was horrible, but he's just a fun guy to watch.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head with him. He's funny. So if he was into something, you're going to watch it.
I remember there was one movie that I loved that I watched recently. I'm like, wow, he's great, but Armed and Dangerous. That was, he was a cop. He wanted to be a cop. He got kicked off the force, and he ended up having to be a security guard with Eugene Levy and his romantic interest played by Meg Ryan. And it was just so bad, but I watched it. I was like, he's fun to watch, seriously, but there were problems. But then of course you've got his classic and his best movie where it's just him, in my opinion, was Uncle Buck.
For me, when I think of John Candy, I remember with my father, we grew up in my father, was a musician on the side, and we listened to a lot of different things. But my parents had a very strong division on what they considered tasteful or appropriate and those things. And my dad obviously wouldn't let me listen to anything vulgar, but he did like some guy stuff. So we used to grow up and watch going to movies I mentioned earlier, but also like stuff like Benny Hill would be on. So a Saturday night we might have Lawrence Welk on. We might have Hee Haw, believe it or not. I'm dead serious. I mean, and we grew up in a household where parents chose what we could watch, and that was it. Yours, I believe, was different. At least when I met you, at least that was my impression. And the thing about my father with it too is he would watch it, and if it wasn't something good, he'd say, "You boys can't watch this," and we wouldn't watch it, and we wouldn't sneak around because we'd get in trouble. It would be bad. But one of the shows he let us watch was something called SCTV, and it was just sketch comedy like Saturday Night Live. It was one of the few things on the 3 or 4 stations we got here in Central Florida, and he was just funny. And I can't even watch American Pie now without Eugene Levy thinking of him going, okay, that's the guy from SCTV. And he's been successful. You can call him a grade B, grade C actor, a character actor, whatever you want to call him. But I just go, you know what? He doesn't offend me. John Candy was always a funny guy. So even if he was in bad movies, he usually was funny. And that's kind of really what you watch it for. And maybe this scene was funny, this wasn't. But he seemed likable. He didn't come across as a jerk off or anything. So, yeah, it's fun to have a fun-loving guy, and frankly, he was one of the first fat guys I knew as a comedy or an actor. To be honest, I mean, that I thought, okay, he's not one that's bitter or angry. He's just the cool guy. He seemed like he'd be fun to hang out with. So yeah, John Candy, good stuff.
And I do agree with Dr. Venkman. Great Outdoors Spaceballs was excellent. I love Spaceballs, and Camp Candy. I was a little bit too old for Camp Candy when it came out, Venkman. So I don't really remember it. It's just that just came out during our we're into cars and girls phase. But as far as the movies, yeah, Spaceballs is a freaking classic now. What do you think about Spaceballs? Is this one of those that you don't like because everybody's hyped over it?
I'll be honest with you. I honestly had never seen the film or even a segment of it until we were starting to do the Halloween reviews. I think we had talked about it on one of our live streams, and I remember you, me, and Dalton were having some differences as far as things we thought were cool or not, and Spaceballs came up, and I kept going, damn it, I've got to see this movie at some point. And then one morning we were having breakfast, and we went to put something on while we were doing some of our chores, and we just started watching it, and it's light. It was decent. It was funny. I always loved Mel Brooks, of course. I didn't realize he was a part of it. I'd forgotten or whatever, but
he directed it.
Well, but the point is okay, I just didn't remember it because I think about the Mel Brooks movies. But you can't make a movie like that today, and I think it's a shame. And for Mel Brooks to really be able to dial it down and still be somewhat funny and entertaining, I think is pretty good. It's definitely a nice movie for the time too. So yeah, John Candy was good, and everybody else too. It's a good period piece.
Now, that's very interesting that you didn't watch it until recently because
it seemed very juvenile, and I was not a huge Star Wars fan, so I avoided it.
Yeah, and I also would wonder how the jokes played because they were so much of their time. It's classic and it's timeless to those of us who do love the genre and know all the movies, but I would just have to assume it's kind of like a time capsule to a kid today. I would love to like show it to my daughters or my nephew and then see how they like it just based on the fact to the movies that were being not even to the original Star Wars as much as we were.
Yeah, and also all the Jew jokes and all the shticky kind of things that Mel Brooks did in all of his films.
Oh yeah, he joked about Jewish people all the time. So yeah, I mean he did Springtime for Hitler. So yeah, but as far as the John Candy, one movie that I didn't like until recently that Venkman brought up was The Great Outdoors, which is one of those John Candy played the good guy who thinks that the neighbor's the bad guy, so he ends up being the bad guy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's very formula, but it's a lot of fun. He and Dan Aykroyd really do sell it. The one movie that my family loves that doesn't get any kind of love in the John Candy oeuvre, if you will, would be a movie called Summer Rental, which came out around 1985.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where they come down because he's actually a they call those the people he watches for airplanes, the air traffic controller.
Air traffic controllers, yep.
And he gets overstressed, so he comes down to Florida. So you actually have the Florida beaches and everything, and then you realize, wait a second, they're like the Florida beaches off the coast of Thailand, that kind of thing. Where like, yeah, we don't have islands like that in our beaches. So it's a little funny, but the really cool thing is that there are some scenes that are filmed there, so it's really neat to be able to go, oh yeah, I know where that is.
Right.
I've seen that and I know that. But other than that, it was just a fun film that I enjoyed quite a bit, that I really liked to watch because Carrie Green from Goonies was in it, and I always thought she was cute back then. Don't tell
I didn't
me
know that. Well, I won't if you won't.
Yeah. Oh, but it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. So yeah, unfortunately, he was a guy who died way too soon. Way too soon.
And just again, I can't emphasize enough. I'd mentioned before about the Canadian connection with a lot of these people on Saturday Night Live and also up north, but also the the Halloween movie was so influential. You've got your Jason movies coming from that, and that was Canadian based, and you had Canadian horror films coming out at the same time. So you definitely had this Canadian thing, and it was very weird to me being here in Central Florida. It's friggin' 85 degrees in mid-February all the damn time, and you get through channels, and one of them picks up this Canadian show, and then you get people like John Candy, Eugene Levy, and others that are from up there. Shatner, of course, was like the first Canadian I always think of too, because of, I was a huge original series fan. So Candy, yeah, he's one of those guys that knew his place. He did it very well. He didn't seem bitter about it. He didn't seem like wasn't offended by not being the handsome, good-looking guy that would be the leading man. So whenever you saw him movie, you're like, oh, it'll be fun to see him. Yeah, you're right. I don't know. I can't think of anybody off the top of my head that's like that today. I know people try, but it's just not the same.
And you know what? I will say this. Normally, I wouldn't recommend the movie to somebody like yourself. I don't know how you go with political films, but if you really want to see a good John Candy performance where it's like, holy crap, where'd that come from? Watch JFK. He plays a detective, and he a shady detective, like really kind of slimeball, and he does very well because he's also kind of hipster stylish. It's really, and there's a line in there. I don't remember exactly how it went because I've changed it myself. You've got the wrong hey hey and the right. You got the right hey hey, but the wrong ho ho. It's just that kind of language that he spins it very well. And yeah, it's just a performance I would never expect from John Candy. So that was one. Okay, so anyway,
Venkman's saying it's illegal not to like Bret Hart if you're Canadian. Well, that's true, but I didn't know anything about. And he's trying to impress me with his skills. And the bottom line is if he really knows about wrestling and Canadian stuff, he'd know about the pink and black attack, which is Bret Hart's kind of thing. He'd know about Canadian violence, and we went over the Chris Jericho thing. So, Doctor, I've got one for you, and if you know this one, I salute you. If I could be serious for a minute. Just go look that up on your own time. All right, segue. Next piece of news.
You and I are on different sides of this particular debate, but Steven Spielberg came out against Roma and against the fact that Netflix movies are being nominated for Oscars. Now, you and I, we had this discussion. We were talking about, during the top 10 and everything from last year, we were talking about, do you count Netflix movies in your top 10? Or do you actually count them with theatrical releases? And so Steven Spielberg comes out and says they should be nominated for Emmys because Netflix is on TV and not in the theaters. Where do you stand on this?
I kind of am a little old school, but I probably had mentioned something along the lines of being ignorant with everything that's going on in the universe today when it comes to movies. And by this, I generally mean your realm, which the comic book movies dominate everything, the tentpole franchises. And so when he came out and he said that initially, I thought, I have a tendency to want to agree with him. However, I always think the Oscars, I've hated them for a very long time, never liked them, although we did used to have those wonderful Oscar parties, and that was always a lot of fun. I enjoyed trying to predict, and do what we did. But it always made me think, I don't know what the rules are. I don't know who gets a vote. I don't know how they look at it. I know if Netflix makes a movie and the rules are, hey, if you give it a limited release in Kerplakistan, University overnight for 3 days, it can qualify. then they're playing by the rules. I just don't know if they are enough to talk about it. But I will say, on the bigger picture, the issue I have with movies and everything too is there used to be a great movie experience going out to the theaters. I despise it now because I think crowds are much worse than they used to be. Get off my lawn type of speech here, but when I got my 55, 60-inch TV at home on my surround sound, why do I want to get out? And if I want to watch something, even if it sucks, I can have a good experience at home, and something really needs to be big to get me out. Now, that being said, I do believe that there are some stories that just seem like they're good as far as being filmed, and seeing on a big screen is an experience like no others, and I still want that experience. So even though I have kind of a hate relationship with Spielberg in general for certain things, I'd have to do a deep dive with you on that. I don't necessarily disagree with him on that, but is it really just sour grapes? It's what it sounds like coming out from him. So I guess my question to you would be, not really knowing anything, what is he trying to gain by this? Back up the truck, he's got another $1 billion he's going to earn this year. Okay, that's fine. But I don't know. I didn't realize it was such a passionate topic for him. I do have a tough time trying to draw the line. I really do.
I think it is a passionate subject for people who really care about the movies and the sanctity of the Academy as well. And Steven Spielberg is somebody who does what he loves. If you've seen the documentaries, you know about him. He was in love with film as a child, and I think he just wants to keep that kind of sanctity going, because the rule is that a movie has to be in a theater for like a week. And this is my problem with him going after Roma, because Roma doesn't fall under what he's talking about. If you release a movie straight to Netflix, it's never been in a theater. Okay, it's an Emmy thing, I guess. But Roma actually spent a week in a theater beforehand, and a lot of movie studios will put a week during Christmas just to get Oscar consideration for that year.
Mm-hmm.
And they know
problems with what they're doing. I don't, and they meant to do that anyway, because they're trying to give themselves more cred, and I get that.
Well, yeah, because these are movies that are generally not going to be the ones that, like what you're talking about, that you have to experience in the theater. But if they get that for your consideration, if they get the nomination for an Oscar, that's extra money in the pocket, because people are going to want to see it and find out if it's good enough, because people like the Oscars. We talk about how much we hate the Oscars, but for some reason, people still watch them. People still enjoy them. I've told you before, the Oscars this year, I think I'm done with them. So what are you doing tonight? I'm watching the Oscars. It's just that it's that way. I still like to make my list, and I still like to guess who's going to win. And I still watch all the movies that get nominated. Yeah. And there are movie buffs like myself who will do that. The reason why I hated the Oscars I was willing to give up was because Jimmy Kimmel fucking ruined them for me the previous year with his, you have an obligation to talk about politics. No, you have an obligation to talk about, like I said before, how Woody Allen's movies affected New York. You do that same old freaking montage. I don't care. Do the movie musical thing. I don't care. So long as you're talking about movies, not politics, that's what you have the obligation for, which I think that's what they lose in the Oscars anyway. But now you've got this new way of seeing movies, and that's the streaming. A lot of people see some really good movies on the streaming services that otherwise would have gotten releases, but because the movie landscape has changed, these films aren't seeing the light of day. There was a Coen Brothers film last year that didn't make it to theaters. It went straight to Netflix, and it got nominated for Best Screenplay. But I mean, it's Coen Brothers, for cripe's sake. Coming up, there's a movie starring John Travolta this month in March. On the 15th, there's a movie starring John Travolta and what's his name plays Poe in Star Wars. And it's just based on the cast, it should be getting a big screen release. But this is the way it is. However, I don't know if I disagree with Steven Spielberg. There are rules to it. Why not just have the ones that are on the big screen? But this is a question I've always had, because since Blockbuster was invented, since the VCR was invented, there's always been straight to video movies. So
and very profitable market too. Absolutely.
Yeah. So why can't they be a part of the reindeer games? Because some of them are very, very good. hobo with a shotgun.
Yeah.
Just, I mean, I know it sounds crazy, but if you watch it, it's actually a really good. So yeah, it is. It's a big debate, but in all honesty, like, what do you do with these excellent films that are making it to streaming only, or to, in our day, it would have been straight to video only. So,
Well, you know, the whole thing too is a lot of times I think the fascinating part that I immediately came across when I started listening to your channel and being a part of some of your live streams, especially with the fans, how passionate they were about certain topics and this and that. And I think the one universal theme is people care about the characters, story only because it, you know, exemplifies characters, you know, that kind of stuff, and the rest of it, not so much the politics and everything that's in it. And I think the one lens that's very difficult for a lot of people to separate or try to shift gears and look at through is the fact that it's a business. So if Netflix is saying, you know what, we're going to spend $1 billion this year on intellectual property, so that way in the future as a business they don't have to, you know, license all these movies, more power to them. Now eventually it'll catch up to them. If the quality sucks and people don't like them, they may go somewhere else, but if they find a hit or two, like Stranger Things might be, the Bird movie I think was a complete flop despite them saying it was huge. You know, it's business, and so you're going to have, like you said, a lot of movies that people are going to go, oh, this kind of bombed or didn't do that good, or Coen Brothers want too much on the back end, so we're just going to release it, you know, on our digital download platform. Those things are just going to keep up. The average fan doesn't really want to give a shit. They want to know what's coming out. They want to know if it's worth watching, and they want to be entertained. Not necessarily a lot of them want to think too hard. They don't want to get too deep necessarily, but as long as there's a writing, people can get out there, that's fine. I think the hardest problem for everybody, and this is what Steven Spielberg may be saying in a different way, is how do you decide what's worthy and what's not? And that's a value judgment. As long as Netflix is playing by the rules of the Oscars, well, Steve, you know, choke on it.
And that's absolutely it. I guess they would have to come up with a video, like whatever streaming awards or something like that. Otherwise, if you are a streaming service and you have a movie, find a theater that will show your movie for 1 week or 2 weeks, so it has consideration. Dr. Venkman, I do not have a family video. I don't have a video store around me at all. We have the Red Box, but that's about it. Do you have a video store around you at all?
Well, by where you used to live, you know, a few miles from where I'm at now, in that plaza that we used to shoot pool, there was a video store. I think it's still a video store, or it might have just closed down. That's the last one that I remember. That was every time I drove by it during my different jobs, I would be like, okay, yeah, that's probably the last video place I could ever think of that you could go rent something. So yeah, I mean,
that was in Longwood. The one on
1792.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, 434. Yeah. Because most of the places are just got the used ones that you buy now, like if you go into Best Buy and whatnot too. So
hold on, dude. You are roboting?
Really, and you are too.
Okay, so it might just be my computer.
Okay. That's better.
Yeah.
No, so I mean, yeah, remember the first one opened up by us, close to the Pine Hills Palace, maybe a mile down the road. We're several miles away from what used to be the Institute for the Criminally Insane, who shall not be named. But yeah, that was the huge blockbuster. When I think of blockbuster, I think of that one, even though they just grew like a weed. Yeah, it's insane. I think the hardest thing is finding a movie, and between Netflix and all these places, I think the problem of the movie being made and getting streamed to the person is the whole problem, in the sense that everybody hates, you know, look, how do I say it? Whether Star Wars film sucks or not, or any of these comic book movies, doesn't matter. People are paying money. They're going to see them. They can complain about them all they want. They're going to keep getting made as long as they make money. I have zero issues with that.
Yep.
Now, what will happen in the marketplace, despite what people like to think in terms of economics, the prices are going to keep going up, and they're going to go up because of salaries, are going to go up because of advertising and all that. You know as well as I do, if a movie doesn't do well in that opening weekend, they're not going to show it as many theaters. So what's Roma supposed to do? If Roma does really well, are they going to expand it? Do they have the option to do that? Probably not with the first time or two that it comes out. I'm speculating here, but you know, it's still a film, isn't it? It's tough.
And I tried to watch it. I know some people think it's excellent, but I just can't make it through it. Not me, man. I'll try again, but nothing has appealed to me about it. So I don't know. But yeah, as far as all that's concerned, yeah, I got to say, if you think you've got them, I'm with Steven Spielberg. If you think you have something, then put it out in a theater before you put it out on your streaming service, because it has to be in a theater first.
That's it.
What you gonna lose? You just put it out. Just if and somebody like Netflix has money to go to your local theater and say, here you go, put this out, and we'll give you this much money. It just or share, because that way you get your prestige that maybe brings more people into your streaming service than what you paid for it. I don't know. But yeah, I got to tell you, I think you convinced me. I think this conversation convinced me. I stand with Steve on this one.
Well, this is the issue I had was when we were talking sci-fi films, and I'm trying to remember the name of it. Was it? I want to say Armageddon, but I know that's not right. It was Annihilation. It was on Netflix and in the theaters at the exact same time, and that was pretty smart, I think, on their part. So where do you put that? And it wasn't bad to me.
It had a theatrical run. I would put that as eligible. And in all honesty, it was really good. It was. That deserved a larger audience, in my opinion. It really did. But okay, well, you know what? That starts off, I guess we'll end this broadcast with a couple of reviews. What have you seen this week?
I saw, it was funny that we were talking about trying to find films and what's on Netflix, what's on Prime, because I watch a little bit of Prime, and also we probably will be talking about what's on Hulu too, and not just in theaters.
Oh, yeah.
So sometimes I like to, based on what we talk about, go out and if somebody recommends something, make lists, and through the 6 degrees of separation, that internet hellhole, going down that rabbit hole, I found one that actually is pretty good, and it's a horror movie. It's called, I think it came out in 1981. It's called Dead and Buried, and I think the print doesn't exist anymore.
Wow.
The story, it reminds me, it's a little Lovecraftian in a sense. This guy was in a small town. He left and he came back, and he's the police chief or whatever like that. I guess he had went to college or something like that, was working in the town. So he goes back to a small town, and it's a town of like maybe 100 people. But he's the sheriff. So the movie starts off with this guy, and this hooked me. Again, we talked about hooks and what makes us want to see a movie. The way you would describe it to me, it made me want to see it, or somebody did. Guy starts off, he's at a beach. He's just taking photos. It's filmed in like Northern California, so it's pretty beautiful. And this pretty blonde lady comes in there and notices him, and they start having a conversation. He starts taking pictures of her. She's getting all kind of hot and bothered by the attention. She takes her top off, and she's like, well, do you want me? And he's like, well, yeah. And she's like, take me. And you're like, man, in 5 minutes there's boobies, and so something bad's going to happen. And this guy, he wasn't raping her. It wasn't anything like that at all. They start making out, and they start, going after it. And you're like, okay, I could buy this happening. It's kind of weird, but things like that do happen occasionally. And then within 5 minutes, a group of people just come around the corner of these rocks where the water's hitting the shore, where they're making love, and they just beat the holy shit out of the guy. I mean, and then they hang him up, they pour gasoline on him, and they burn him alive. You're like, fuck, that's pretty intense. But here's the thing: the chick in Flash Gordon, she's in it. Okay. Robert Englund, Freddy Krueger, he's got a small role in it. There's several people who you're like, I've seen this person, I know this person, I've seen this person. And what happens is the sheriff, about halfway through the movie, the guy who got burned ends up getting killed while he's there in the emergency room. And you see it, he gets like this needle right through the eye. You're like, ooh, that's disgusting. But the nurse that killed him is the lady that seduced him. So you're like, okay, I see what this chick's doing. But the problem is the sheriff sees the guy that got murdered like a week later, but he's doing something different, like pumping gas. And so he's trying to figure out, holy crap, what's going on here? The couple people that have died this past week, I'm seeing them a week or two later alive again in this town. And of course it has, this big, kind of ending sort of stuff. But I was like, oh, this is pretty damn good. I'm trying to stay spoiler free. I hate saying that because
it's
but if you watch it,
something movie,
but it was very good, and it was one of those ones where I think the print got lost. It wasn't a big release, but it got to be a cult following, and it has legs because it's decent. It's not the best thing ever. Sometimes some of the acting is bad, but some of it's pretty good. And it's when you go, man, they don't make a movie like this too much anymore, which is just entertaining. You sit down and you get caught up in the atmosphere and the mood. So Dead and Buried, 1981, directed by a guy named Gary Sherman, who I have never heard of before, and it's got a few B players before they were big. And the guy who did the special effects was Stan Winston, who I believe was the guy that did the American Werewolf ones, and he did a few other films I think like that too. He did some James Cameron movies I think too.
Yeah, that's some serious. That's some serious name there. That's a big name drop right there. So
yeah. So Dead and Buried, thumbs up for me. I liked it a lot. What'd you see?
I saw a couple of them. The first one that I found to be very charming was a movie called The Boy Who Would Be King. And this is a take on the King Arthur story. It's a modern day tale. Merlin comes back. He's in old form. He's Patrick Stewart, but he makes himself look like a kid because the modern day King Arthur is this little kid who gets bullied by Lance. You know where this is coming.
I'm listening.
Where it's going. Yeah. And they have to stop Morgana, and it's an adventure story, and it follows a lot of the beats of the King Arthur legend. You know, Lance betrays him, you know, so forth and so on. And it's just thoroughly charming. It's just an enjoyable little film. And that's exactly as great of a review I'm going to give it. It's something that you're going to watch and you're going to have a good time and probably forget after you see it until it's brought up again. And you're going to go, oh yeah, that was kind of good. That was nice. But more than likely, you're never going to watch it again. And that's not a bad review. Take this as a good review. If you find it on Netflix, check it out. If it's on Hulu, if it's on Amazon, go. I wouldn't search it out, but if you run into it, it's called The Boy Who Would Be King. It's a movie that takes place in England. A lot of really good English actors that kind of support this group of kids. They act like actors, you know, kids. They don't act like precocious little crap things that are, you know, they're not bad kid actors. And it's just a lot of fun. But ultimately, it's a throwaway. So, yeah, take that how you will. Another throwaway movie shocked me.
Real quick. Kid Who Would Be King. I'm looking at her right now. Morgana, played by Rebecca Ferguson, the Mission Impossible woman.
Yeah.
That's a total smash.
Yes. Yes, you are correct about that.
I just wanted to get that in there for the record.
The other one I saw, which I thought was a throwaway, was The Favorite, which got nominated for an Oscar. And I know the woman who played the Queen, I'll get the name here in just a second. She actually won. And I will say this. Yeah, she definitely, Olivia Colman plays Queen Anne, absolutely deserves the win. She was bonkers. And she did certain things at a drop of a hat where she's playing one emotion, one mood, and then in a second, she's just way off the rails. And she does this all throughout. You can watch her go insane slowly in some scenes. It's really done very well. But the movie's kind of dull. It really is not. It's a story about bad characters and bad people. I usually have a hard time with that. If you're unlikable, why do I like you? And I'm going to have a hard time attaching to it. Emma Stone is in it. And the story is, Rachel Weisz is the Queen's confidant, and you know she's kind of like the power behind the throne. Emma Stone, she used to be nobility, but now she's on hard time. She's a handmaiden in the castle, and she begins to worm her way into the Queen's favor, and she works Rachel Weisz out to the point where the two of them are a bit of a rivalry. You know, I didn't die after seeing it, but ultimately it was forgettable. The only thing that wasn't forgettable was Emma Stone does a topless scene. Thank you. After that, there's not much to say except for Olivia Colman was good. Rachel Weisz everybody was well acted. It's just paced very slowly, and I just couldn't get into it. And the final one, which was the biggest surprise to me, is a movie called Isn't It Romantic?
You mean like that old standard song? That's what I always think of.
Isn't it romantic? Love is on the way. Okay, the reason why this was a surprise to me, there's two women I never want to see in a movie. One of them is Amy Schumer,
Correct.
and the other one is Rebel Wilson. This is the fat Australian girl. She's in
Oh, I know who she is, but isn't
yeah.
that other chick in it? I have to confess, I felt very ill a few years ago while hiking, and I ended up watching several episodes of Quantico, and I think she was the lead.
Priya,
Deep Pockets,
yeah,
Chopra, yeah,
Priyanka
her.
Chopra. Yeah, she's very beautiful, and yeah, she is in this
She
a
cannot
little.
act worth it out of a paper bag.
No, she's not very good. However, this film got me. I'm watching it. I'm going, okay, I see what you're doing here. This is actually pretty fun. Because one, she is a fat woman, and she's a fat woman in this movie. So the whole premise of this is she has one of those meet cutes where she gets knocked out and she's transported into a romantic comedy where she's living the romantic comedy, and she knows it. And it makes fun of all the tropes of a romantic comedy. You know, she even walks out and she goes, "Why does New York smell like lilacs?" And, you know, and there's flowers everywhere and it's beautiful, when, you know, she lived in a shitty neighborhood beforehand. And they really do play around with it a lot. And it's kind of done very well up to the point where instead of making fun of the tropes, they start following the tropes. So for the first 2/3 of this film, it is just a lot of fun, and I'm very surprised. I enjoyed Rebel Wilson in a movie, but once it becomes the romantic comedy itself and it starts following it, the stuff that it made fun of, I kind of turned off. So yeah, this is 2/3 of a really good movie and 1/3 of a piece of crap.
See, I take a guy like that Adam Devine guy, and he's
Yeah.
not funny at all. But I sit there and say, you know, if John Candy had a hold of his material or something, you know, you might just somebody else could deliver it or something would be good. But yeah, no.
Oh, okay. And review, he watched the Mummy trilogy, which is on Netflix right now, and he says the third one was horrible without Rachel Weisz. It's got Michelle Yeoh in it, man. I can't knock it. I can't knock that movie because, you know, Michelle Yeoh.
Was that the Oriental one, right?
Yeah.
Well, but that was the one they made several years later, right?
Right. Yeah, and by that time, Rachel Weisz has already won Oscar in, and she's just way too big for the Mummy movies. So I still enjoy it. I do agree that it is not as good as the previous two, but I can't say it's bad because it's got Jet Li and Michelle Yeoh. Yeah. And I don't care if she's 50 something, she still looks hot.
Well, I don't disagree. I mean, you know, just I don't know. I remember thinking I liked it. Don't know if I would now. I kind of like the first two movies, but the problem I had with them is they were a little childish, which isn't bad because a part of me says, you know, there was parts of it where if they had just made them a bit more adult-like, they would have been great because I was an adult when I saw them, not a kid. And I don't know. Sometimes.
Oh yeah, if we saw that around the Goonies, you know, if we saw that in 1985, 84, we would have been in love with those movies. Would be the catch pajamas stuff.
I think so. I think so. Yeah.
As they were fun diversions. They're very entertaining to me. But yeah, I do see what you're talking about.
But you don't really have these swashbuckling type movies. Like I thought he did great in the role. He's got that kind of, yeah, I'm an adult, goofy kind of guy. Can almost be serious, sort of, you know, not, you know, too intense, but intense enough. So kind of like a lighthearted Indiana Jones or a different one. I don't know. But, you know, I thought that they were pretty entertaining. I just thought any of those kinds of ones that are more of like a serial type thing, a juvenile type movie, there's not many of them. And I understand everything that's a friggin' trilogy getting written a day is getting made into movies, no matter if they're good or not, but they're all fantastical. And it's like I almost would want something adventurous to watch, and it's just, it felt devoid. I mean, obviously it did well enough to do a third one, and I didn't think it was horrible, like I said, what I can remember, but it's been a while. Yeah, but Michelle Yeoh, just so you know, that's a total smash.
Yes. Even at 50. Well, we're 50 also, so it's okay.
You might be.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you still got a year. Actually, I've got a year, so yeah, we're not quite there yet. So anyway, that's all I got.
Yeah, actually, that's all I had. I know we talked a little bit at the beginning about some of the things that we're going to be previewing and taking a look at with Bond with next week and all that too. So, Beck and everybody else, as we're talking about next week, we're going to be taking a look at the Connery movies. We're going to be discussing them. at length. We're going to do the same thing the week after. It looks like, say, with the more films and whatnot too, but be ready. Watch it. And on Your Majesty's Secret Service, you know, it's technically not a Connery one, so you don't have to watch it, but it's very, very good. But just be armed and, you know, ready for hunting bear, you know, when you're ready to talk James Bond next week, because we can go into great detail about Bond, or we can gloss over it. We basically want to talk about what we liked, what we didn't like, what we thought was the best, what we thought it wasn't out of Connery. And we're trying to figure out a way to say, okay, well, which of Connery's 4, 5, 6, 7 movies had the best gadgets to the worst. I mean, we want to really get into some good detail with it. So be looking forward to that.
Connery did 8 Bond films. 7 of them are in continuity, and one of them is Never Say Never Again, which will be put at the end of the Bond month, along with Lazenby and Woody Allen.
That's true. That's true.
Woody Allen has a Bond film. What you gonna do?
Cry and then cry some more.
Yes, yes.
And then realize that it doesn't matter whatever happens with the Bond film coming out. It's like my Washington Redskins. You know, they got horrible owners. It's going to be that way until I die, and they're never going to win a Super Bowl again. Just like Bond movies are never going to be good again. But that's a whole nother conversation.
We'll see. We'll see.
Anything else?
No, we need to come up with an extreme movie ending. We'll have to talk about that. Otherwise, you've got the controls tonight, so you get to end it.
Man, for the first night, it was so easy. It almost didn't feel extreme, but I like to say that it was extreme. Extreme. All right. Yeah. All right, everybody.
Extreme. Yes. Yeah. Have a good night.
Have a good night.